are joining us, I'm going to repeat please make sure your name and organization, if there's space, are listed around your screen. To do that, go into the participants list, find your name, click on it and hit rename, and that'll allow you to adjust it. Sometimes people come in as their organization or their cell phone number, etc. And the other pieces, and I'll repeat this again, this is a working meeting. So if you want to do some of this work on your computer and use PowerPoint or Word or other programs on your computer, open them up. If you decided that you want to use markers in arts and crafts and are going to share like this, you are welcome to do so throughout today. Just make sure you have the materials that you need handy for today's activities.
Abby, does that mean we're going to be sharing with each other? Now all of a sudden I have performance anxiety.
Well, you should never have performance anxiety in this space because it's a safe space. We're all here together to learn. We're working on drafting something together. Everybody's going to get something wrong and everybody's going to get something right. And that's just going to be the way it is. And just so we're clear, this is a map of the US. So you understand what the minimum standard is here. I think you're good, Phoebe.
But the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But mostly in small groups, Phoebe. Mostly it's not large group sharing.
Okay. Thanks, Hannah.
So will this count for the test then?
Yes, for the test at the end that you'll all be graded on, Cheryl. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Emily, let me know when you think most everybody's here.
A few people are trickling in, but we can probably get started shortly.
Okay. So as people are trickling in, again, please make sure the name on your screen is the one you want us to use, and that your organization's there if it fits. Also, we are going to be doing some work together today. So if you want to do your work in a Word document, in a PowerPoint presentation, however you choose to do it, make sure that you have those materials together. You can also do it on a piece of paper with markers or a piece of paper with a pencil. All is fine. So I am going to get started and say welcome to the first webinar that is not a complete convening for the Massachusetts Community Health and Healthy Aging Funds. Today we're going to be talking about developing a theory of change. We're intentionally talking about developing a theory of change so that you can use it to develop your evaluation plans and use it as a guide. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please rename yourself and your organization in the screen. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. If you are not fully Zoom professionals by now, to see just the speakers during the presentation portions of the convening, just use speaker view. To see all the participants, use gallery view. We will be sharing the slides and the recording following the meeting. And we completely understand that most people are working from home and they have newfound work from home buddies. Those folks and those pets are welcome to join this call. We understand that people may need to get up and shut a door. They may have a child or a pet sitting in their lap. We know that those things happen. Today is a little bit different than how we would do this under other circumstances. We're looking to increase your familiarity with theories of change, to help you understand how a theory of change can be used to guide your community health and healthy aging fund activities, and to understand the steps for developing a theory of change and identifying strategies for engaging your staff and partners and volunteers and community in the development of that theory of change, and to develop a first draft of your theory of change today. It's going to be a small draft, but it will be a first step. Under other circumstances, we would spend a half a day in larger teams working on having all of this come together and for you to leave with a much solid document. There would be lots of moving around in the space, and it would take much longer than this, and it'd be way more interactive than this. We have set up today's webinar, and we're recording today's webinar so that you can go back and walk through these steps yourselves. You can do it with your team members. Or you can, if for folks who are unable to be here today, they can review the recorded webinar at their own speed. We're going to go through some introductions. We're going to start drafting a theory of change, and we're going to do it in steps. We're going to take a couple steps. We're going to allow you to work in small groups. We'll take a couple more steps so you can work in small groups, and then we're going to wrap it up by 2:30 today. For a quick round of introductions, I'm Abby Atkins. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I am the evaluation lead for this project and the Healthy Aging evaluation lead for the Healthy Aging Fund. I have with me today, and you will meet each of these folks as we go through the day, Hannah Carliner. Hannah, can you just wave so people can see where you are on the screen? Hannah is the Community Health Fund's evaluation lead. Hannah is going to be working with the PSE folks and the CHIP folks. Maiwa Sanusi, one of our research associates. Maiwa, if you could just wave so that people can see where you are on the screen. And Pri Rana, a research assistant of ours. Pri, if you could just wave so we can see where you are on the screen. Again, today's going to be a working meeting, so if you haven't gotten up and gotten your markers or your pencils or your paper, or pulled up a Word document or a PowerPoint on your screen, please feel free to do that as I hand it over to Hannah to get us kicked off with what is a theory of change.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we suspect that there is a pretty wide range of experiences with developing and using theories of change in this group. So apologies to those of you who are pros and know all of this information, but we hope that we do have some pros here because of the group work that we'll be doing. We're very much seeing this webinar as part of the learning collaboratives that we are growing with a strong goal that you all will learn from each other. So with that, for those of you who aren't as experienced, a theory of change is the description of how you're going to do what you want to do. So it's a comprehensive description and illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. So you all, in submitting these proposals, are change agents. There is something that you want to change in your community, in our state, and you have developed a project to try to accomplish this. So your theory of change is the roadmap of how you expect to do that. What are the logical steps that you're going to take that will lead to the outcome that you want to see in your community? So a theory of change it has lots of components, but the sort of major chunk of it is how your program or initiative will lead to the desired goals being achieved. But the way you start is you start with these goals, and those are the sort of long-term ambitious why of the work. It's why you're doing what you're doing: reducing poverty, increasing affordable housing for groups of people, reducing food insecurity. It's sort of the big why question. Once you have that, you work backwards to identify the who, what, where, when, and very importantly, the how. We can move to the next. So theories of change come in very many forms, and especially with this grant funding, we don't want to limit you. We'll provide guidance for what we want to see, but we very much expect you to be working with your partners and with your communities to develop a theory of change that is actually useful. So this is not a requirement that we want to impose. It's not the final exam homework assignment. It's intended to be useful to you and everybody that you're working with for the next 1 to 5 years. This is an example that obviously you can't read any of the text, but just showing the sort of level of complexity and linear hierarchical thinking that a theory of change can be developed with. So, including short-term outcomes, long-term goals, impacts, influences, leverage points, a key to explain what the different circles and rectangles indicate. If this works for you and your partners, fantastic. This will be an incredible way to guide your project over potentially 5 years, and a great resource to go back to again and again to really dig into, okay, well, we thought this was going to lead to that. Doesn't look like that's doing that. Let's rethink and change the order or change what's in rectangle number 7. If this doesn't work for you, do not use something like this. And we really want to encourage creative thinking about the visualization of theories of change. If you want something less linear, if you want something that's more shaped like an organism, or more sort of artistically creative in ways that I can't envision because I'm a logical type A kind of thinker. So this is an example. It's still a linear pathway of a theory of change, but it's obviously much simpler. This is our current to be adapted, constantly living document, theory of change for the community health funds. So you start with these. Here we've started on the left with sort of the grounding anchors of what our main strategies are for achieving, on the right, these ultimate goals of increasing health equity, improving health outcomes, reducing disparities. On the left is our actions. We have done this PSE funding, we're doing capacity building activities, and we have, with DPH, funded you all in the CHIP and the other funding streams. And then we have this sort of process by which we think we will achieve these ultimate goals. Next. This is the simple form of our theory of change for the Healthy Aging Funds. So this is just sort of an example of another visualization that may work for you. Very simply, a box with a vision on the left, and then a series of arrows describing the various levels of outcomes and steps that we want to achieve ultimately. So we will, thanks. We will, work with you on whatever is best, but you can also have multiple forms of your theory of change. You can have, for for your sort of core working group, something more complicated and more detailed, and then also something simplified to present to your community partners and new people that you're meeting. So we also want to emphasize that we think developing these theories of change are very important in policy systems and environmental change work, because these projects are so ambitious and because many of the goals that we all want to achieve honestly are not going to happen in the next 5 years. That's how ambitious our and your goals are. And so having a theory of change really grounds you and really is like a nice place to come back to year after year and see, okay, are we still on the right path? Is there something that we have as a goal that we got so wrapped up in this other thing that we've sort of forgotten or neglected this other aspect? So especially with PSE work, having this living document, but documented document with these PSE goals at the end can be very, very helpful and can really help you think through how you want to see this change happen, what's missing, what's working well, what needs to be adapted. It will also lead to a better evaluation of your work as you are able to measure your process as you revisit this theory of change and use it to develop an evaluation plan and think about the longer term goals in addition to the program outputs. I think that's good, Abby. So in the work that we're about to do in the breakout sessions, depending on which funding stream you come from, we really want you to sort of ground your thinking in which goals you're going to work on today, in thinking about these ultimate goals of policy systems, environmental change, community health improvement for CHIP grantees, and developing the components of age-friendly communities. And all of this, so this is all sort of the context of the Massachusetts Community Health and Healthy Aging Funds, which all emphasize also increasing community engagement and dismantling structural racism in the state of Massachusetts. So we just want you to keep all of these in mind as you work in your small groups today. So step one, actually, should we jump back to the agenda, Abby, and just quickly list all the steps? So steps in developing a theory of change. Step one is clarifying goals. Step two is identifying the strategies to reach these goals. Step three is creating so that chains. So do this, so that. Step four is linking strategies to outcomes and goals. And step five is testing the logic and relevance. Step six is articulating your assumptions. Sorry about that, Abby. So then back to step one. So a goal is the ultimate impact you want to achieve in your community, and it's an ambitious and visionary statement, and hopefully is agreed upon by all of your partners. What in the first breakout session that we're doing, we want you to work with your partner to make sure that the goals that you have, or the one goal that you choose to work on, is a SMART goal. SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So the acronym is widely used in a lot of different areas, but is really especially important to evaluation work and to this kind of work that you're doing, to really make sure, is this something, like, how will you know if you have achieved the goal? You need to make it specific, measurable, and all of these other things. Next. And then step two is identifying strategies. These are the how of how you're going to achieve these goals. So strategies can be program strategies, service provision, educational campaigns, initiatives, collaborations, community organizing. So it's whatever you have specifically proposed that your project is going to do to achieve these goals. And then thinking specifically in terms of strategies from a policy systems environmental ambitious funding perspective, you really want to think about strategies that are sustainable but also adaptable, so that you can revisit this theory of change over the years and say, yeah, we've been using these 3 strategies. We've been doing community organizing, advocacy, and capacity building efforts, and the advocacy really isn't going that well. Maybe we need to change what kind of advocacy we're doing, or we need to, this one campaign went through and now it's over and now that's done. It's really not sustainable. So that's how we want you to think about these strategies in your small group. Are they sustainable and adaptable? And are they really going to get you there in terms of achieving your long-term goals via short-term outcomes, which we'll get to over the course of the webinar. So I think I'm a little ahead of time, but that's wonderful. And so we can, actually, let me ask if there are any questions at this point, or if Abby wants to add anything.
So Hannah, I think Cheryl had an interesting question about, is this an answer-based way of doing things? What if you're looking to do something that hasn't been done before and you don't know how to do it, and it depends upon who shows up to figure it out, who's there to help you to co-create? And I think that one of the reasons why we are using a theory of change and thinking about it and not forcing people into using a really specific program logic model is allowing for folks to question whether or not if they go down a certain path, what are the potential outcomes? Who else needs to be at the table? And is this where are the points along the way that they need to challenge themselves? As well as to leave you with a model that's flexible enough so that if you went down a path and weren't seeing the change that you were looking for, to allow you to, as we're going to talk about later, think about what those assumptions are and where change may need to happen. Hannah, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, that was great. Any other?
So we are going to go in the small groups. Though we've already created those small groups based on the registration list that we had, and tried to keep people together by the focus of some of the activities that you had already, the topics that you had already planned to address from your proposals. This is, you'll stay in with the same group, and so that you are doing some individual creating and some co-creating together. You should be able to build off your own experiences that you've had in putting the proposal together, your familiarity with the work that's been funded. If you are a partner who's come along recently and is less familiar with the work that's being funded, you can pick a goal and a strategy that you want to start with and just start from there. Hannah, and you want to give us instructions?
Can you advance the slide? So we're going to ask you we know that you all have many goals in your projects. We're going to ask you to select one to work on throughout the course of the webinar, and sort of see that through to the end of all of the steps of developing a theory of change, so that you'll then be able to adapt it to your other goals. We had talked about keeping groups together. There was a question in the chat. And logistically, it was not as easy to do that. And we also really want this to be this sort of initial steps of the learning collaborative. So we have tried to pair you with people doing similar work, and we're hoping that you can inspire and create together and learn from each other. So apologies, but you are in separate groups from your other organization members, project members, and if you want to offline decide which goals you want to work on, please do.
So Emily, can you send us to our groups?
Sure can.
Emily, is it possible to share this slide with the small groups? Be the text.
We can copy the text, yeah. Although I think I would have to go to each group and type it in. We probably would have had to send it before.
Okay.
But if
Okay.
you four want to join, I'll put you guys in groups, and then the rest of them I can try to jump in and send the information.
Great, thank you.
Does it matter where you guys go?
Nope.
Okay. Are we waiting, or did you want to go?
No, I think we should go now because I think they don't have instructions.
Okay, one sec.
Okay.
Wait for me for a second. I'm just gonna copy and paste. I think we can send it to everyone.
Oh yeah, if there's a way, go for it. I wasn't sure if the chat goes to all.
Yeah, just 1 second. Also, I'm like,
Bree, I'll put you in a breakout room, and then let me know if you can't see the chat.
okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
I mean, I probably will be able to see it actually, but let me ask Myra.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll let you know.
All right.
I'm going to ask Tempe if she can talk a little bit about redefining your goals.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name's Tempe Staples, and I am from a coalition for a greater healthy Worcester. And I am the evaluator and the writer for the CHIP. And something that is really at the heart of our method and how we're starting to approach our strategies and our actions is putting lived experience first in the formulation of our plan. And so we have a leadership of 10 people who will be overlooking these 5 different working groups. And something that comes up a lot in my work in general, and especially with the CHIP, is, you know, to quote Abby, are our indicators measurable or are they meaningful, and can they be both? Something that often comes up for us is that, you know, systems are created by the indicators that we're tracking, but we don't always feel like we're tracking what's truly meaningful to our community and our constituents. 5 years ago, you know, we discovered just through lots of qualitative research that parents of very young children were experiencing insane wait times to see a behavioralist. And it led to a lot of other findings. And that was something that would not have necessarily easily come up if we hadn't done that sort of qualitative research. But as I'm sure we all know, it can be very difficult when it comes to like having neat, clean measurements, difficult to consistently track those kinds of outcomes. So as time goes on and as I start to record what, you know, comes about from our group meetings and our methods and our strategies and what our community members who were, you know, compensating to be part of the CHIP have to say, you know, we're going to really try and incorporate their personal lived experience and their perspective into what we measure.
Great, thanks, Tempe. So folks should have had the time to identify a goal and in the strategy that the strategy or strategies that they're planning to implement. The next step in developing a theory of change is creating the so that chain and linking strategies and goals and future outcomes. These two steps allow us to create a picture of how different goals and outcomes relate to each other. We can clarify what you intend to do. You can create a so that chain to describe what will happen when and as a result of your efforts. Your so that chain might get you to goals and outcomes that describe impact, influence, or leverage. Some of you may have developed similar chains in program logic models or in just in your development of your proposal for this work. It's the map that gets you from where you started to your short and long-term outcomes. So you have your strategy, it leads you to one or more short-term outcomes, one or more long-term outcomes, and hopefully to an improved state.
Abby, you're
Yes.
not sharing your screen. Do you want me to?
Yeah, not sure how that happened.
Is this sharing?
So let's try again, because this says that I am sharing my screen.
Interestingly, this just happened in another meeting I was in an hour and a half ago.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop sharing.
No, now you've started.
And well,
Now you stop.
let's try one more time. It likes to, thanks Cheryl. If you could hum a tune while I figure out the technology. It is,
Abby, I'm going to try.
thanks.
Yes, or is it? Are
Woot,
you,
woot. Yes.
yes? Okay.
We do see presenter view, Hannah.
Yeah, that's what also happened in this other meeting. Something's glitchy
Well,
with it today.
we're going to go with it.
Okay, hopefully there's nothing inappropriate in the comment notes.
They're very small on the side, Abby.
Okay, great. Because I've now lost in the entire ability to the screen has slightly disappeared for me. So when creating these so that chains, you are looking at a situation where if you're doing X so that it leads to Y results for individuals or in families, what are the steps that you can take in between? Can you go to the next slide? So an example of that chain is if your strategy is increase media coverage and of an issue and the solution that you're seeking, you would implement that strategy so that public awareness of the issue increases, so that policymakers increase their knowledge and interest in the issue, so that policies change to support solutions, so that organizations and providers offer new and revised service, so that individuals and families access these services, so that individuals and families are in an improved situation. I've also lost the chat box, so if people are putting questions in the chat box, Hannah, I'm going to leave it up to you to call my attention to that. We're going to go back into small groups and walk through some of those so that chains and think about what's the connection of the strategies and the next set of outcomes that you expect to happen. What is the process the order in which those happen? And do they actually lead to the goals and the future outcomes that you are looking for? Emily, can you put us back in our small groups?
Wait, sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
So that chain is supposed to, I'm confused as to whether it's supposed to connect us to our goals to other future outcomes, or the strategies to future outcomes.
So it's connecting when you implement the strategy, you should have a set of short to long-term outcomes, those next steps that you expect to happen to get you to the goal that you have.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Hi, everyone. We're back. And I guess I'm not sure, Abby, if you're on, but I'll ask if any of the HRIA people want to volunteer something from the groups they sat in on.
I can go. I think we had a really great conversation. And we also talked about how a lot of this isn't linear. So thinking of different models of how to represent this as well would be helpful. I do wanna, I am gonna, sorry, put you on the spot, Gretchen. I think you explained, I really like the way that you explained the strategy to the goal and like some of those different steps. So if you could just offer that to the group, I think that'd be really great. Sorry again for putting you on the spot.
No, it's all right. Thanks. So I have identified so far that I think our end goal is to end redlining practices and policies in Essex County and beyond if we can. And one of the strategies is to engage political leaders and gain their support. And one of the ways that we plan on doing that is sending out a municipal survey to sort of see where they're at in terms of education around housing policy, and sort of have them try to rank the importance they place on it, though we kind of have an idea of that. And then with that information, we're planning on creating a educational training to further engage their support so that we can reach that end goal. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you.
And I am going to ask Alexis if she could share her So That chain.
Sure. I am with the Massachusetts Public Health Association, and our team and Neighbor to Neighbor is working on a project that aims to improve transportation in Greater Worcester and Greater Springfield. And so one of the goals of the project is to grow the voice and power of residents to influence transportation policy. And so one of the strategies that I selected that we are planning to implement are community assemblies. And so that chain for the community assemblies are that will hold community assemblies so that will raise awareness in community about the issue, so that will provide community members with an opportunity for leadership, so that we can develop a policy platform that informs a local campaign so that residents can engage in a transportation and housing campaign that is community driven, so that we will grow the voice and power of residents to influence transportation policy.
Great. Thanks, Alexis. Does anyone have any questions for Gretchen or Alexis? And we can do a free-for-all so that you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
I'm struck by the fact that so many of us are creating theories of change that have to do with increasing community voice and empowering residents. And I guess I want to put in a plea for a whole separate gathering of everybody who proposed to create some kind of ongoing community advisory body. And if we could get together in like 6 weeks or whatever, 2 months, and share these with each other, you know, like the tools we've come up with or the ideas we have and the so that chains, it would be so helpful.
So interesting you brought that up, Phoebe. In the group that I was just in, the 2 examples that they picked both had to do with community engagement. I think one that has to do with the emphasis on community engagement in these funds. And 2, it has to do with the emphasis on equity and improving community and voice. And 3, to let you know that we are going to continue to come up with ways for people to talk about what success looks like in this work. And in doing so, we'll be engaging all of you in that discussion and providing opportunities for you to help us define what that might look like. We're also talking about new opportunities and topics for people to get together. So taking that piece, Phoebe, and making that into a learning community, even if it's a short-lived one or even a long-lived one, great, works for us. And we'll take that, we'll bring that up to the rest of the HRIA team and the DPH team. So we are going to move right into the final section, and I think some folks have already dealt with these issues. Steps 5 and 6 around creating a theory of change are testing logic and relevance and articulating assumptions. Your theory of change may very well change before you get started or after you're deep in your work. This is the opportunity to ask yourself, are there logical linkages between the strategies and the goals and the outcomes that I have? Are these the most relevant goals and outcomes to be included? Things may have changed in the context in which you're doing the work. You may have gotten feedback from the community that says, this doesn't make sense to me and this is not important to me. How have you engaged the community in your process? That's something to think about. You may have put in some assumptions around how they'll be engaged or some assumptions that they won't be engaged, and what are the consequences of that? What are all of the assumptions that are influencing your work? What are those assumptions that you have about the current and future political context in which you'll be doing this work, whether that's on a local, state, or a federal level? I think we all had assumptions that we would be doing this and having this conversation in person, and that's clearly not happening. So to think about what are you assuming is going to be in place for you to move forward, and just making sure you're articulating that and knowing that they are going to, they're going to change over time. So we are going to move you into your groups one last time. At this point, you should be able to walk through a very drafty draft of one strategy to a goal, and talk about, does this make sense? Is this logical? And list what are some of the assumptions that you have. So we're going to go back into the small groups. This will be our last time in the small groups. And go back in the small groups, and we'll be back in the large group in about 15 minutes. So Emily, can you put us back in our groups?
and schools. We're starting out on 2 levels. One is to identify nationally recognized best practices and nationally recognized ways of measuring progress. But we're also doing a local assessment, which involves focus groups with students and key stakeholder interviews with staff and administration of schools. So that assessment will lead to being able to identify what are the gaps and needs and opportunities. And that will lead us to being able to issue to each district a local report. But then in the combination of having this local research done and doing this national level research will help us to identify priorities both for individual districts and schools that we would agree upon with those districts, but also to perhaps recommend some regional strategies that school districts can work on as a group.
Thank you, Rachel. And I like this sort of local sphere with a national sphere over it. So I like this thinking about nonlinear representations of these theories of change.
Great.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Cheryl.
Okay, so here's my systems question. To Rachel's point, so if the system is the thing that has systemic racism and white supremacy in it, then how is the theory of change recognizing and incorporating that reality? Because best practices, who develops the best practices that are applied in our schools, which we know our schools for non-white people and Native people are actually oppressive and cause harm to the students. So I understand that we need to work within the system, but if the system is the thing that is making us sick, then how do we begin to incorporate that reality into our plans? Because I haven't heard anything about dismantling systemic racism or systemic white superiority. And if we are all part of the systems that supports this, how do we begin to know when we are doing it ourselves to other people?
I just like to jump in really quickly. This might be helpful with the example of best practices, right? And to your point, who develops those best practices? I think one of the things that has been very big with these funds is that authentic community engagement and what that looks like, right? So I would think that, you know, in what was just described of trying to understand what the best practices are nationally, if you have authentic community engagement, able to go through a process in which you're able to talk to a community that will be directly affected by those best practices, and have a conversation around, are those best practices actually best practices for us? So for me, I think that the authentic community engagement piece and really engaging who the different projects and strategies and best practices or what have you, who's ever being affected and who's going to be really getting the brunt of that, making sure that they're able to inform the process is a way to mitigate recreating structures and practices that have oppressed people over time. So that's just my answer. Other people may have different ideas of that, but that is one way to mitigate that.
So I think that's a great answer, Maiwa. And I think that also reminds us, Cheryl's just question itself, reminds us that we are now in a shared group together in which we can remind each other to step out of some of our white dominant culture pieces and question what we're doing and think about what are the other ways to mitigate structural racism or dismantle the structures that were there, and to support each other in making those suggestions. So thank you for the question, Cheryl, and thank you, Maiwa, for the response. Rachel's showing of how she had diagrammed her her one strategy for the theory of change. I just wanted to share one more way of looking at it. This is Annie E. Casey's theory of change fish for their making connections theory of change. So you can see how different theories of change can look. I know we've gone over time, so I just want to remind folks of a couple next steps. And I know that there were some suggested next steps added to this conversation. You do need to create a full theory of change for your community health fund and healthy aging funded work. And I would encourage you to engage your team and your community members in this process. Please feel free to ask for feedback from your colleagues in your own organizations, from your partners, as well as from folks you may have met here today, as well as from HRIA. And to make sure that your theory of change is submitted to HRIA by December 18th in 2020, in 2 months. We are using the theories of change that we get from you and the evaluation plans that we get from you to further inform what the larger macro evaluation looks like, and to continue to figure out how we can work together in sub-cohorts for change. If you need one-on-one technical assistance, or even if you don't need it, you just want to call us and chat about it, feel free to email myself or Hannah, and we'll figure out how to find time to go through your theory of change. And just a reminder, there are one-on-one quarterly meetings for grantees that are coming up in November and early December. We do have the Developing the Evaluations Plan webinar on the 18th of November. And given Phoebe's comment about this is too short, I am reserving the right to rethink how we go about this next piece that people are going to, and I see lots of heads nodding on the screen next to me. We do have a feedback survey, so this session evaluation form. We use all of these forms to inform how we set up the next sessions and how we set up other sections. If you haven't done it already, can you please put this link in the chat box? You will also receive this link in an email that we send you later today. I am also going to shamelessly put in a plug that has nothing to do with this project in particular. If you have not filled out the Massachusetts COVID-19 Community Impact Survey, please take a moment to do that. Please take a moment to share it with all your friends, your family, your personal networks. If you do not know what I'm talking about, you're about to get another email that tells you what I'm talking about. The survey is only open until the end of next week. We are not extending it past the 30th. We are thrilled with our response rate overall. I would really love to see more young people ages 14 to 27, and I would love to have a stronger and louder voice for people of color in the results of this survey. If you look at this survey and say, I have a fabulous strategy, and that it potentially involves needing some financial resources from you to implement that strategy, but I can get that strategy implemented by the end of next week, I may have some dollars available for you. Please feel free to send me an email today and let me know about that. So again, you're about to get an email about the Mass COVID survey. If you haven't filled it out, fill it out. If you can share it with all of your friends, family, and personal networks, that would be greatly appreciated by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and any entity who wants to use that data on the other side. Fill out the survey when you get it, and please feel free to send us some feedback. We will rethink how we've set up the next session. And that is it for us today. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to touching base with all of you really soon. Take care.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.